Hi, and welcome to InfoSec Alert. So you've been sending out a lot of resumes, and finally someone got back to you, and they're requesting for an interview. So now the question would be, what now? The whole idea of this video is to really help you through this obstacle that you'll be going through to understand the different expectations and what are some of the approaches that will really help you overcome this interview. So of course, whenever we're talking about interviews, the idea is that we're trying to find the best fit for you, the company, but also it's the company's way of finding whether you're the best fit to solve their problem that they need at this moment. Hopefully this video will help you also increase your chances of getting hired when you prepare properly. And of course, when you prepare properly for an interview, it also allows you to have a higher power advantage to negotiate for a higher salary. So with all this, I assume that you have already gone through the job description that the company has already provided you online, and you had a really thorough look at it. The most important thing is to ensure that what you're looking at is something you really want to do. And if you are a beginner and you're trying to get yourself into cybersecurity, ensure that your job description does have an element of security in it that you can leverage as a jumping platform in the future. Yeah. So the important thing is to ensure that this is the right job for you. If not, there's no point investing yourself into it. So there are three categories, plus an extra bonus one that I'll be talking about in the later part of the video. Three categories that all your interview questions are kind of split up into. So the first one that we'll most probably be afraid of is the technical aspects that to be challenging you with. I'll be going with you the different approaches and the expectations the company is most likely expecting from you. The next thing will be general questions. So these are questions that I'll be going through that you will definitely see 100% of the time coming up in your interview. And lastly, we're talking about profile questions. These type of questions are basically a way to assess you and for hiring managers to know a bit more about you so that they can see whether you have a gel with their culture. So let's start off. So for general questions, I think the mindset or the framework that you should be going into is your whys. Why are you leaving your previous company, or why you started with this company? Be very sure of your whys. I recommend to do a lot of self-reflection just to make sure you have a really strong whys whenever you're going into this interview, because these questions are always going to come up, and a solid, believable why does provide a good uh, indicator of the drives of why you're entering the company. The other thing that they'll be probably going through are your background. So they just probably want to know, like, where you came from, how you got into this industry, why you got into this industry, if you had any qualifications, what kind of qualifications you did. Generally, these are the questions to just have a good sense of who you are. Next thing, the next kind of questions are questions that will definitely come up because they are to do with the expectations you have of your current role and your growth prospect. So if you're intending to go into a manager role, they'll probably ask you, what do you expect to see yourself in the future? Do try to project yourself, and even though it may seem a bit lofty and unreasonable to be predicting what you are going to be doing in 5 years' time, the question actually is to assess your sense of ambition and the sense of growth that you have in the company. Because some companies do love people who understand their value and understands their value to maintain itself, to grow in their value. And lastly, of course, they'll want to ask about your range. So when we're talking about salary for your range, my recommendation is to go into job sites and understand the range that is applicable to you. So if you're a beginner, look for beginner level 1 jobs and then find that range. Whenever you are in the interview and they do ask your salary expectations, a good tip is to never give them a whole number. Always give them a range. Give your expected range a higher range to be a bit more higher, and then justify why you deserve that higher range. So, like I said before, these are almost 100% to come out in your interviews, mostly from HR personnel, but they are definitely going to come. So what I provided at the end of this video and the bottom of this description is some links that you can have to just get yourself more ready for your interviews. So I found this really good article by Harvard Business for the best approaches whenever you're trying to answer these kinds of general questions. Because, sometimes it's all subjective, but just being able to tactfully lay out your words, tactfully lay out your approaches does make a lot of difference. Next, probably the most important part and the one that you want to know more about is the technicals. So whenever we're talking about technicals, always remember companies are looking for wisdom and less of knowledge. So what do I mean by wisdom? So whenever we're talking about wisdom, we're talking about the know-how of how to implement the different tools that there are in the industry. There are plenty of tools out there. There are plenty of antiviruses. There are plenty of network detection tools. And it's not enough to just tell the company during the interview that, hey, you just need to implement this, you just need to implement that. The more important aspect is to know how to implement it, what to implement, and where to implement them. And even more so is that after the implementation, what configurations need to be done to best effectively use these. Let me give you an example. So, whenever they're doing these kind of cybersecurity interviews, a large majority of time, they will love to give you the network diagram. My God, don't know how many times I've actually seen companies keep on giving network diagrams and then they'll say, hey, I have this, what can you do about it, right? So, most of you who are beginners will be very tempted to just say, hey, I just want to add in a antivirus. You should put some firewalls into it. It's not enough to just say to do that. When we are looking at network diagram, you need to say that you want to set up a firewall, and then you need to tell them something that demonstrates that wisdom of using that tool. So you need to say, okay, then we need to start restricting certain ports that are unlikely to be used. We'll be allowing certain traffic. What kind of traffic? You need to share that with them. And that's the important part. And that's where you demonstrate that you have the wisdom needed for this job. Next thing is that they'll most likely give you scenarios as well. So some of the scenarios that we're talking about is, hey, I have this incident or I had this situation and what should I do about it? This is where I feel that you need to have this sense of know-how of how to manage that incident. So this is when you bring in a concept called CIA. Confidentiality, integrity, availability. I'll be adding this at the end at the description below, but essentially this is a framework to know what you should do in case of an incident and how to fix it. As long as your framework suggestion fits this framework, that to make sure that there is a CIA triad being addressed, it is usually an acceptable one. So what is CIA? Essentially, C means confidentiality, ensure that only the people that are supposed to look at it have the ability to look at it, and no one else is, unless authorized. A is availability, to ensure that whenever the information or that item or thing is needed to be accessed to, it is 100% there. And then integrity, to ensure that whenever there's information passing through or whatever incident that happens, when the output of it is needed, it is not degraded or corrupted. So that's one framework that you can use to model your answers whenever you're trying to answer these kind of scenarios. The good thing about this kind of framework is that with these mindset frameworks, you can kind of change your answers depending on the situation, and generally the answers is still going to be correct. Next thing that I see very often happening in these kind of interview questions is where they'll give you mock investigations to do. So most of the time they will give you a PCAP. PCAP logs are basically logs that are produced by Wireshark, and Wiresharks are tools that monitor the network traffic going in and out of a certain device. Most of the time, they will give you this log and they require you to analyze it to create a timeline of what is happening. And if you see anything suspicious, to call it out and investigate that situation further. So I know this seems a bit daunting at first. So I have some guides and certain resources that I can point you to really help you through it. So in order to get a good sense of what you should do and the wisdom and the best practices when implementing security, I recommend this linear hardening guide that I'll provide the link below. And for your mock investigation practice, this is very important. I suggest you go to this malware traffic analysis test. Essentially, they provide PCAP files for you to test yourself, to go through the process. So when you're really doing the actual interview, you'll be ready and it'll be a piece of cake. In most cases, when I'm going through the PCAP investigation, most of the time it's about there's some internal employee that's trying to sneak out information, there's this business deal, and you're just trying to figure that all out and find out what is being communicated. And most of the time you find a malware in the traffic, in the network traffic, and then it's your job to try to figure it out and to decode the malware, recreate it, and try to do malware analysis on it. So that is the common things that I see during interviews. Then lastly, you'll be asked profile questions. So profile questions is usually done by the hiring managers. The idea of it all is to first find out a proper matching of the culture. Because the hiring manager knows how the culture is like in the company. They need to make sure that you are a good fit for them and whether you are a good solution to their problem that they need to solve, right? Just always remember that all this information, you are trying to solve their issue as much as they are trying to solve your employment issues. Also, during this process and time, this is also an important moment for you to learn more about the company. This is not just them trying to learn about you to match their culture. It's also for you to understand their culture. So do ask questions and understand more about it. Some of the other things that they'll probably be asking are questions of how well you're able to handle problems, and that's where your grit comes in. And then your character and ambition. So these are things where they are looking out for that they feel will be good for the company. So if you want to know more about certain attributes that companies are looking for, I provided a link below to understand more about what they are looking for, and you can model your answers to best answer them. And one more category, if you realize that I haven't mentioned but it was at the diagram, is this evidence. So in all the categories, it's all good and and then you can say a lot about it. But the important thing is being able to prove that whatever you said is what you've done or what you really know about it. So for technicals, if you are able to show some portfolio of things that you've done, things that you've gone through, or certifications, those are proof to show that you know what you're doing. For profiles, most likely they'll need proof of things that they know testifies to your character. So if you do have moments where you're helping out in charities and all that, do mention it. Those are evidence for character. And then general. This one is something that you probably have because you're preparing for all resumes, but your certifications, your education, and your past experiences and your job experiences are all what you really, really need for this. So these are basically all the categories that will help you prepare for your future interview questions. And I really hope that they provide some value to you. And if you have any questions or any comments or want to share any more further tips, I recommend you drop them down in the comments. I would love to read them. And until the next video, do like and subscribe. Bye.